Okay, hi everyone. This is try number 2 to this Facebook Live. I think we were having technical difficulties before. If anyone can't see the live right now, it will be up after I end it. So just rest assured, you will still be able to see this one way or another. So just quickly again, my name is Michelle Velasquez. I am the bilingual advocacy coordinator at the Farm Worker and Landscaper Advocacy Project, and I use they, them pronouns. And I have Lee Vanderlyn today from from NIJC's LGBT project. And thank you, Lee, again for joining us and for for being in conversation with us today. And if you'd like to reintroduce yourself briefly, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. Apologize for any trainer background noise on my end. But yes, I'm Lee. I use they, them pronouns as well. And I'm a supervising attorney at the National Immigrant Justice Center's LGBT Immigrant Rights Initiative, where we do a variety of immigration remedies with queer people, but mostly humanitarian and asylum work. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you, Lee. And so quickly, just to reiterate, the purpose of this live is to uplift the work that our partners do and show our community the commitments that our partners or organizations we collaborate with have made towards immigrant justice, and to demonstrate the intersectionality of the worker rights movement with the immigrant rights movement. So just before we get into conversation with Lee, I wanted to also share a little bit about FLAP and the resources we currently have for the Latinx farm worker and worker community in general in Illinois. FLAP is an organization that's mission is to improve the working conditions and opportunities for low-income workers and their households in industries such as cannery, farms, greenhouses, landscaping, nursery, packing houses, restaurants, and snow plowing in the winter. FLAP carries out this mission through advocacy, community outreach, community legal education, and what that looks like is through conducting outreach in the state of Illinois and presenting Know Your Rights in the field to workers, referring workers and families to other legal relevant resources. And we also partner with local and more nationally known organizations to be able to serve our community. During this pandemic, FLAP has been able to facilitate access to cash transfers to low-income workers and their families. And we, of course, do our work and serve our community members regardless of their immigration status. FLAP, first and foremost, educates workers about their rights in the workplaces. We build relationships with churches, consulates, and other organizations to carry out these presentations. Our staff and our community navigators travel to different parts of the state in order to make sure workers are able to get this information. And FLAP is partnered with more than 150 organizations and a network of attorneys that handle cases to defend folks if they aren't being paid a minimum wage or overtime, or if they are forced to pay for the uniforms or equipment for their jobs, and resources for workers' compensation and accidents that occur in the workplace. If you'd like to contact FLAP, you can do so directly on our Facebook page or by calling 888-451-3527. I want to give a quick shout out to that we have financial assistance options for low-income workers in cities like Cicero, Berwyn, Maywood, and Melrose Park, and resources to be able to give laptops to working families living in King County. And we also have financial aid resources for folks who identify as women in King County as well. If anyone knows of folks who live in these towns or counties and are low-income, Latinx, undocumented worker experiencing a financial hardship brought on, especially during this pandemic, please give us a call or message us through Facebook or any social media page. Now with that, I wanted to get into some questions for you, Lee, and about the work you do at NIJC. I think it's such a detrimental time to be informed about immigrant rights, because the work we do definitely intersects with challenges that undocumented workers face every day. And I think that the LGBT immigrant issues are even left more in the shadows because of homophobia, transphobia in general. So if you can start us off by telling us more about the LGBT project at NIJC and the services that it provides.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel so grateful to be able to work in this space, because there are very few organizations, or like even subsets of organizations, that specifically focus on the LGBTQ community. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of intersecting dynamics that come into play, especially when I'm thinking about workers' rights. Trans folks are more likely to be under and unemployed, based on that transphobic employment discrimination. And we see similar dynamics in the immigration field as well, that people who face a societal stigmatization already, perhaps like maybe because of their immigration status, might face an additional stigma of being LGBTQ. So I think it's really amazing to be able to say that, we exist for this community, that we are kind of this designated specialized resource. Like I mentioned before, we do many types of immigration cases. We don't do any employment or kind of student visa type cases, but we'll do U visas for survivors of qualifying crimes, T visas for survivors of trafficking, family petitions, so, between spouses or parents and children. And the bulk of our work is in asylum. And asylum is a legal remedy for people who have faced harm in their country of origin because of a protected ground, and or fear future harm because of a protected ground. And being queer is widely held as one of those protected grounds. The law and it can get very hairy, but that's just a brief overview. That's most of the work that I'm doing. And what's really cool about that is that you can use someone's queer identity as a tool, or as one way that they could be eligible for relief. So I think it's pretty cool to be able to be engaged in that kind of work.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you touched a little bit about this, but why do you think it's so important for a project like the LGBT project to exist in the immigration services space?
Yeah, I mean, there's some practical ones, and then there's some more kind of values ones from my perspective. I think practically, especially in the asylum context, having specialized knowledge about LGBTQ communities. A lot of the evidence that we will use in asylum cases are something called country conditions research, where we do research on how queer communities are treated in said country. And we maintain kind of this portfolio of current country conditions. So you specialize research in the ways that, homophobia and transphobia are playing out in different countries in that global context. And I think more values-based, NIJC is an organization that is committed to serving all people. And so by really just on its face saying this is a project that is for the queer community, I think it definitely signals the values of the organization, and also that, the queer community is a group that is pretty underserved in a lot of ways. And so having those dedicated resources, I think, signals the value of queer people as, people deserving of respect and belonging. And also just kind of shows that, we are among all other types of communities as well. So both that queer people are included in the dialogue about immigrant rights, and also we can kind of have this specialized lens to be able to better serve.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And, also just a quick shout out. I was, honored to be part of the LGBT project before my role at FLAP. And my next question, delves into the obstacles that LGBT immigrants face compared to what other immigrants face in the detained and non-detained context. I think definitely being at NIJC, this, in my role, I definitely saw just how more of a challenge it was to for LGBT immigrants to navigate through the legal immigration system. But if you can you give us a little bit on your take about that? And again, in the detained and non-detained context as well.
Yes, and we miss you still. So yeah, I think that a couple of things come to my mind right away. One is, so in a detained context, many immigrants who present themselves at the border and say, I want to seek asylum, I'm afraid of returning to my country of origin, they get detained by the United States government. And there are a couple of ways that folks can get out of detention, but they need to have a sponsor. So someone with status that can vouch for them and can promise to help assist them in completing their immigration case. And in my experience, when our LGBTQ clients are detained, it's less often that they have familial support. So it's at times more of a challenge to be able to connect them with the sponsor and to be able to get them out of detention. There's a lot of really great places that we partner with, like the ICDI. There's other places that help us, connect queer immigrants with sponsors or with other housing, but that's definitely a barrier that I've noticed. And also, while people are detained, LGBTQ folks are much more likely to face abuse by guards or by other detainees. So added to their past traumas, added to the trauma of being in jail, oftentimes there's additional trauma that is put on our clients during the time that they are detained. And that only makes preparing their case even more difficult. I mean, switching gears to both, still in the detained context, but more in the non-detained context, one of the rules about asylum that is that you have to apply for asylum within 1 year of entering the United States. It's called the 1 year filing deadline in a lot of spaces. And the process of being comfortable with your gender identity or sexual orientation doesn't always fit neatly into those boxes. And almost kind of definitionally, these folks are fleeing harm, death threats, usually because of some sort of manifestation of their gender identity or sexual orientation. So being able to disclose their identity and being able to do so in the kind of formulaic legal ways that is required is difficult. And sometimes folks are just so closeted, so afraid of disclosing their identity that they don't realize it for themselves for quite some time. So having this box of, okay, you only have this 1 year, otherwise you're not eligible for asylum, I think it really does impact the LGBTQ community. And for anyone, if anyone's listening and is very worried, there are exceptions to that rule, but if you're by just putting yourself in that category, that's one more hurdle in an already really complicated and unforgiving legal landscape.
Thank you. I'm just hearing all these these terms, like 1 year filing deadline, and it's
Is it
all
bringing you back?
It's coming back. And I guess just to give a little bit of a background for folks, can you give a bit of a background as to what is asylum and what are the different processes in obtaining asylum? Yeah, let's start with that first.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I very briefly mentioned earlier that asylum is for people who are afraid of returning to their country of origin because they were harmed in the past or fear harm in the future. And there has to be a connection to a protected ground, and the government is unable or unwilling to protect them. And if you really want to dive deep, on NIJC's website, there are some trainings that we have posted, and the website is immigrantjustice.org. So if you want to check out some of those trainings, there are LinkedIn resources there. But so there's 2.5, I guess, buckets of ways someone can go about seeking asylum. The first way is affirmatively. So if you're not in immigration proceedings, you're not in removal proceedings, then you apply with USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and then you are scheduled for an asylum office interview where you're sitting in an office across the desk and an asylum officer asks you questions about your story and asks you questions about why you're seeking asylum. Are there any bars? Are there any rules like the 1-year filing deadline that might come into play? And then you're issued a decision, either granting you asylum or referring you to immigration court. And that's the second way that people can apply for asylum, is what we call defensively. So as a defense to removal proceedings. And in that context, you are scheduled for a court hearing. And so you're in front of a judge, and then there's a government attorney on the other side. And you're still sharing the same information, how you were harmed in the past, why you fear future harm, why the government won't be able to protect you. But there is the government attorney on the other side cross-examining you and trying to poke holes in your story. Then at the end of the day, the judge can grant asylum, or if the judge can deny relief and order you removed. There's other types of relief that the immigration judge can grant that the asylum office can't, called withholding of removal and protection under the Convention Against Torture. They are conceptually similar to asylum, but there's some pretty significant differences that I don't have to go into here. But the 2 types of ways to apply for asylum are affirmatively with the asylum office or defensively with the immigration court.
Thank you. I think that is a really, I think we can go into, this could be a whole day workshop, but I really appreciate you summing it down like that way. And I think to go off of that, I know, one of my questions is, what are current immigration policies or a policy that is really affecting asylum seekers now, and including LGBT asylum seekers as well?
Yeah, I mean, when you had kind of introduced that question, I was just brought way back because there was a recent announcement that Biden is restarting Remain in Mexico next month. And for folks who may not be as familiar, it was called MPP, or Migrant Protection Protocol, I think was the last P, but I could be wrong. It was a system in which people, migrants who sought to enter the United States over the southern border, were being returned to Mexico and had to stay in Mexico until their immigration court hearing came up. And so many problems with the idea, one of which being seeking asylum is your right, and to infringe on that right is not super legal or great, but that's a fight for a different court day. Where for LGBTQ asylum seekers especially, they were returned to pretty unsafe conditions. Unfortunately, organized violence was really preying on folks who were in migrant camps or around the border, who there was just a lot more movement happening, and LGBTQ people can be exceptionally vulnerable to that type of violence. So that, that program, the reinstatement of that program I think is incredibly damaging. But there also have been other expulsions of asylum seekers under something called Title 42, which is supposed to be more of a public health guidance, but has been used for these anti-immigrant ways to close down the borders, ostensibly because of COVID. But the public health experts all agree that that's not really a priority. That's not an effective pandemic procedure, but these are ways that there's continuing anti-immigration and anti-immigrant sentiment. And again, the impact on LGBTQ asylum seekers is there's less resources along the border. They do exist, and there's some amazing stories of resiliency, but it puts queer asylum seekers in harm's way.
Yeah, definitely. Also MPP, very triggering. Yeah, and thank you for explaining that as well. And I know we're going a little bit over time, but I wanted to, and sorry if this feels rushed, but I wanted to go into our last two questions. And one of those is, how did you, or why did you decide to get into this work? Is there, yeah, like what is your personal connection to this work?
Yeah, I mean, I made the scary and sometimes regrettable decision to go to law school in order to help the trans community. I myself am trans, I'm non-binary, and I knew that I wanted to be able to leverage the privilege that I have as a white person and as someone who has access to higher education in service of my community. And while I was in law school, it just became pretty apparent that trans women in ICE detention, that I just immediately was drawn to the injustice of that. And at the time, there was a little bit less attention on that community. So it immediately drew my attention. And so I interned in law school with NIJC and other immigration legal services providers. And I'm getting to have my dream job from day one. And so, being able to work with trans immigrants and help them along in their journey, and in a lot of really great cases, having their identity be one of the reasons why they get status, is just personally very fulfilling, and is exactly the kind of work I want to be doing.
Thank you. I think when, doing this type of work and having such a strong connection to it, can also trigger not so like happy parts. So, especially this type of work can really trigger vicarious trauma, especially when working with folks who've had so much trauma leading, in their journey to the US and crossing the border and even being detained. And I think with all that, I would like to ask, what do you do for self-care? How do you take care of yourself when you have a full day of, listening to someone's trauma, writing about it, and also just advocating for your clients?
Yeah. And that's such an important question. I mean, it's the silly airplane thing of put your mask on before putting someone else's. This is, every day is a battle, really. Fighting through, working with trauma survivors and teaming up with my clients against the government. It's yeah, there are moments for sure. I think that having really strong supports has been absolutely key. My team at work is incredibly supportive. We all we trust and care for each other. We have each other's backs. And I find that to be absolutely essential for longevity in the work. I mean, I see a therapist. I think being able to have other types, like professional supports in your life, is really important. I also have a really dumb dog, and a cat. And so I like, just like chilling out with the pets absolutely is part of my self-care needs.
Mhm. Awesome. I love your pets, really, I do. And just to add on there, having been a former colleague of yours and also a personal friend, I think I definitely am able to say just how these many aspects of who you are make you such a great advocate for your clients and for the work that you do as well. So I just
God,
wanted
I'll
to add
blush.
that. But I don't want to take up more of your time. I did want to just ask one more thing, and that's also how to contact the project and NIJC if people want to do that.
Yeah, of course. So on um so on our team, we have a warm line that is answered 10 to noon on Wednesdays and Fridays. But if you leave a message with your name, phone number, someone on our team will call you back throughout the week. And that phone number is 773-672-6551. So that's 773-672-6551. And again, you might not get a direct answer. Someone might not pick up the phone, but if you leave a voicemail with your name and number, someone will get back to you. So that's one way to schedule intakes with us. If you can go to the website immigrantjustice.org, and there's other ways there of getting in touch with us. But that's probably the easiest way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I wrote that all down. So for everyone who's asking for that written information, I will post it on a comment right after ending the Facebook Live. And that would be it for today. Thank you so much, Lee, for joining me in this conversation, for sharing a little bit about yourself, and for sharing a lot of your knowledge in the work that you do. Thank you for all you do. And yeah, thank you for all you do. And I hope we can talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And thank you for the work that FLAP is doing. It's really important to connect immigrant rights and workers' rights. So I definitely appreciate the work that y'all are doing.
Of course. Thank you. And everyone who's watching, have a good evening. And thank you for joining us. Bye.
All right. Bye.